The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty training grounds of Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California. Sarah Martinez adjusted her rifle scope one final time, her breath steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. 27 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun and eyes that missed nothing, she had spent the last 8 months preparing for this moment. The shooting range stretched out before her like a concrete ocean, dotted with targets at various distances. Some were stationary, others moved on mechanical tracks, and a few were designed to pop up without warning. This wasn't just any qualification test. This was the final assessment that would determine whether she became the first female sniper to serve alongside Navy SEALs in active combat operations. Master Chief Rodriguez walked behind the firing line, his boots crunching on the gravel. He had trained hundreds of snipers over his 20-year career, but never had he felt the pressure like he did today. The eyes of the entire military community were watching. Some hoped she would succeed, others waited for her to fail. Sarah took her position behind the Barrett M82 rifle, a weapon that weighed nearly 30 pounds and could stop a vehicle at over a mile away. The first target appeared at 800 meters. She controlled her breathing, felt her heartbeat slow, and squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed across the range, and the target dropped immediately. "Clean hit," called out the range officer. Target after target fell to her precision. At 1,200 meters, she hit a moving target the size of a dinner plate. At 1,500 meters, she struck a target obscured by heat shimmer that made it dance like a mirage. Each shot was calculated, perfect, deadly. Commander James Harrison stood in the observation tower, watching through high-powered binoculars. He commanded SEAL Team 7, the unit that would potentially receive Sarah as their sniper. Harrison was old-school military, a man who believed in tradition and had serious doubts about women in combat roles. But he couldn't argue with what he was seeing. The final test came at 1,800 meters. The target was barely visible to the naked eye, a small metal plate that would simulate an enemy combatant at extreme range. Wind conditions were challenging, with gusts coming from multiple directions. Sarah studied the flags positioned along the range, observed how the tall grass moved, and made mental calculations that would have challenged a computer. She adjusted her scope, compensating for wind drift and bullet drop. The rifle felt like an extension of her body now, familiar and trusted. She had fired over 10,000 rounds in training, each shot bringing her closer to this moment. The bullet left the barrel at nearly 3,000 feet per second. It traveled for almost 3 seconds before striking its target, a metallic ping echoing faintly across the vast distance. The target fell. "Perfect score," announced Master Chief Rodriguez, unable to hide the amazement in his voice. "I've never seen shooting like that." But Sarah knew the real test wasn't her marksmanship. Anyone could hit targets on a controlled range. The real test would be whether the SEALs would accept her as one of their own. 3 weeks later, she received her orders. She was being assigned to SEAL Team 7, currently deployed to Afghanistan. She would join them at Forward Operating Base Chapman, a remote outpost in the mountains where American forces worked to disrupt Taliban supply lines. The flight to Afghanistan gave her time to think about the journey that had brought her here. She had grown up in rural Texas, where her father taught her to hunt and shoot from the age of 10. While other girls played with dolls, she practiced hitting tin cans at increasing distances. Her father, a Vietnam veteran, never treated her differently because she was a girl. He simply expected excellence. After high school, she joined the Marines and quickly distinguished herself as an exceptional marksman. She served 2 tours in Iraq as a designated marksman, supporting infantry units with precision fire. Her record was spotless, her dedication absolute. When the military began opening more combat roles to women, she was among the first to volunteer for sniper training. The transport plane touched down at Bagram Airfield on a cold November morning. From there, she caught a helicopter flight into the mountains, watching the stark landscape pass below. Afghanistan was a country of extremes, beautiful and harsh, where coalition forces had been fighting for over a decade. Forward Operating Base Chapman sat on a plateau surrounded by towering peaks. It was a collection of concrete bunkers, prefabricated buildings, and defensive positions carved into the mountainside. Home to about 300 American soldiers and support personnel, It served as a launching point for missions deep into Taliban territory. Sarah's helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust and diesel fumes. She grabbed her gear bags and rifle case, stepping onto the concrete landing pad. The air was thin at this altitude, and she could feel the cold bite through her uniform. "You Martinez?" asked a sergeant who approached the helicopter. "That's right. Follow me. Commander Harrison wants to see you immediately." They walked through the base, past soldiers going about their daily routines. Some stared openly, others pretended not to notice. Word traveled fast in a small base, and everyone knew about the female sniper who was joining the SEALs. Harrison's office was in the command building, a reinforced structure that served as the nerve center for operations in the region. Maps covered the walls, showing mountain passes, village locations, and known enemy positions. Red pins marked recent attacks. Blue pins showed friendly positions. Commander Harrison looked up from his desk as Sarah entered. He was a tall man with graying hair and eyes that seemed to evaluate everything twice. Behind him stood 8 other men, the operators of SEAL Team 7. "Martinez, welcome to Chapman," Harrison said, his voice neutral. "These are your teammates." Sarah looked at each man in turn. They were all older than her, weathered by years of combat and training. Their faces showed neither welcome nor hostility, just professional assessment. These were men who had earned their place through blood, sweat, and proven performance under fire. "Gentlemen," Harrison continued, "Martinez scored the highest marks ever recorded in sniper training. Her instructors say she's the best natural shooter they've ever seen." One of the SEALs, a stocky man with a thick beard, spoke up. "Shooting paper targets is different from shooting people who shoot back." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I've been in combat before. 2 tours in Iraq. With the Marines," another SEAL added. "This is different." Harrison held up a hand. "Martinez, you'll be bunking in the female officer quarters. Tomorrow morning, 0600, you'll begin integration training with the team. We have a mission coming up, and I need to know if you can operate at our level." Sarah nodded. "I'm ready, sir." "We'll see," Harrison replied. Dismissed. As she left the command building, Sarah could hear the SEALs talking in low voices behind her. She caught fragments. "Never worked with a woman. And what if she can't keep up?" She had expected this reaction. Now she had to prove herself all over again. Her quarters were small but comfortable, with a single bed, desk, and wall locker. She unpacked her gear methodically, arranging everything with military precision. Her rifle case went under the bed, her uniforms in the locker, personal items on the desk. That evening in the mess hall, she ate alone while conversations flowed around her. Soldiers discussed missions, sports, news from home. She was an outsider, not quite Marine anymore, but not yet fully accepted by the SEALs. After dinner, she walked to the base perimeter and looked out at the mountains. Stars blazed overhead with an intensity impossible to see in civilized areas. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant hum of generators and the occasional radio chatter from guard posts. Tomorrow would begin the real test. She would train with SEAL Team 7, learning their tactics, procedures, and methods. She would have to prove she could keep up physically, mentally, and emotionally. Most importantly, she would have to earn their trust. Sarah Martinez had spent years preparing for this opportunity. She was the best shot in the military, she was mentally tough, and she was absolutely determined to succeed. But she also knew that being the best wasn't always enough. She had to become something more than just a sniper. She had to become a SEAL. Dawn came early at Forward Operating Base Chapman, painting the mountain peaks in shades of gold and crimson. Sarah Martinez was already awake, having spent most of the night checking and rechecking her equipment. At 0545, she made her way to the team room, where SEAL Team 7 conducted their briefings and planning sessions. The room fell silent when she entered. 8 men sat around a large table covered with maps, satellite photos, and mission folders. Commander Harrison stood at a whiteboard covered with tactical diagrams and operational timelines. "Take a seat, Martinez," Harrison said without looking up from his notes. She found an empty chair between 2 of the SEALs. The man on her left was Chief Petty Officer Mike Chun, an explosives expert with 12 years in special operations. On her right sat Petty Officer First Class Danny Torres, the team's communications specialist. Neither acknowledged her presence. Today we begin a 3-week integration period, Harrison announced. Martinez will train with us, eat with us, and participate in all team activities. At the end of 3 weeks, we'll vote on whether she joins our next mission. The mission, Harrison explained, would be their most challenging yet. Intelligence indicated that a high-value Taliban commander named Omar Rashid was moving through the region, coordinating attacks on coalition forces. Rashid was responsible for at least 30 American deaths and countless civilian casualties. He's smart, he's careful, and he never stays in one place long, Harrison continued. We get one chance at this, and it has to be perfect. That's why every member of this team must be absolutely reliable. The first week was brutal. Sarah joined the SEALs for daily physical training that pushed her beyond anything she had experienced. 5-mile runs in thin mountain air left her gasping. Obstacle courses tested every muscle in her body. Combat drills required split-second decisions under extreme stress. But it wasn't the physical challenges that worried her most. It was the subtle ways the team excluded her from their brotherhood. They would stop talking when she approached. They ate meals without inviting her to join. During breaks in training, they shared stories and jokes that she wasn't part of. The most difficult team member was Senior Chief Petty Officer Jake Sullivan, the team's second-in-command. Sullivan was a 20-year veteran who had served in every major conflict since the Gulf War. He made no effort to hide his skepticism about women in combat roles. "This isn't about you personally," he told her after a particularly grueling training session. "It's about the team. When bullets start flying, I need to know that everyone can do their job without hesitation. I've never served with a woman in combat, and I don't know if I can trust you." Sarah understood his concerns, but she also knew that trust had to be earned through actions, not words. Every day, she pushed herself harder. When the team ran 5 miles, she ran 6. When they practiced room clearing for an hour, she stayed for 2. She studied their tactics until she could predict their movements, learn their communication protocols until she could operate their radios better than some veterans. Her breakthrough came during week 2, on a training mission that simulated a hostage rescue. The team was practicing clearing a mock village when the exercise went wrong. Petty Officer Torres tripped while moving between buildings and twisted his ankle severely. He couldn't walk, much less continue the mission. Standard procedure would have been to call for medical evacuation and abort the exercise. But Sarah had a different idea. She quickly assessed the situation and realized she could provide overwatch from a nearby ridge while the team continued the mission with 7 operators instead of 8. "I can cover the entire village from that hill," she told Commander Harrison, pointing to a rocky outcrop 400 meters away. "If any opposing forces try to flank you, I'll have clear shots." Harrison looked skeptical. The ridge was a difficult climb, and reaching it would require moving through terrain that might be watched by exercise enemies. But with Torres injured, they needed a new plan. "Do it," he decided. "But if you compromise the mission, you're done here." Sarah grabbed her rifle and extra ammunition, then began the climb. The rocky slope was steep and loose, requiring careful foot placement to avoid creating noise that would give away her position. It took her 20 minutes to reach the ridge, moving like a ghost through the shadows. From her elevated position, she had a perfect view of the entire training area. The mock village spread out below her, with the SEAL team moving methodically from building to building. Through her rifle scope, she could see exercise enemies positioned to ambush the team. Her radio crackled with tension as the SEALs encountered their first obstacle. 2 opposing forces had taken positions in a building that overlooked the team's planned route. They were waiting to spring a trap that would end the exercise in failure. Sarah acquired her targets through the scope. At 350 meters, she could see them clearly despite their attempts at concealment. She keyed her radio. "Overwatch to team leader. 2 targets, 2nd floor of the blue building, northeast corner. Request permission to engage." "Granted," came Harrison's immediate reply. Sarah controlled her breathing and squeezed the trigger twice in rapid succession. Both targets went down, struck by training rounds that marked them as eliminated from the exercise. For the next hour, she provided precision fire support that allowed the team to complete their mission flawlessly. She eliminated 6 opposing forces, each shot perfectly placed at distances ranging from 200 to 600 meters. Her position remained undetected throughout the entire exercise. When the mission ended, something had changed. The SEALs gathered around her position as she packed her equipment, asking questions about her shots and commenting on her tactics. For the first time, they included her in their post-mission discussion. "That was some seriously good shooting," admitted Chief Chin. "I couldn't even see half those targets." Sullivan remained silent, but his expression had softened slightly. That evening in the mess hall, Torres limped over to her table on crutches. "Thanks for having my back out there," he said. "That could have been a real mission, and you saved us from walking into an ambush." Word of her performance spread quickly through the small base. Other soldiers who had been watching her integration with curiosity now looked at her with something approaching respect. She had proven she could shoot, but, more importantly, she had proven she could think tactically under pressure. The third week brought live-fire exercises with real ammunition. The team practiced advanced tactics in terrain identical to their upcoming mission area. Sarah's role as sniper became increasingly important as they refined their operational plan. The mission to capture Omar Rashid would require the team to infiltrate a mountain valley where intelligence indicated he would be meeting with other Taliban leaders. Sarah would take an overwatch position on a ridge nearly 1,000 meters from the target compound, providing precision fire support and early warning of enemy movements. During one practice mission, disaster struck. A communications malfunction left half the team cut off from command, moving toward what they didn't know was a simulated ambush. Sarah spotted the danger from her sniper position, but couldn't reach them on radio. She made a decision that went against all sniper doctrine. Abandoning her carefully concealed position, she moved rapidly along the ridge to get within range of the separated team members. Using hand signals and mirror flashes, she warned them of the approaching threat. Her quick thinking saved the mission, but it also drew criticism from some team members who felt she had taken unnecessary risks. Sullivan was particularly vocal about her decision to leave her assigned position. "Snipers stay put," he told her bluntly. "You don't abandon Overwatch to play hero." Sarah accepted the criticism, but she also knew she had made the right choice. Sometimes rules had to be broken to save lives, and that was a lesson every SEAL understood, even if they didn't always admit it. As the third week drew to a close, tensions within the team reached their peak. The vote on her inclusion in the upcoming mission was scheduled for Friday evening, and opinions remained divided. Some team members had clearly accepted her capabilities, while others remained skeptical. The deciding moment came during the final training exercise. The team was practicing helicopter insertion techniques when the pilot announced an emergency. Engine problems would force them to land immediately in hostile territory, and they would have to extract on foot. The landing was rough, throwing everyone around the helicopter cabin. When they hit the ground, Sarah's rifle case burst open and her primary weapon scattered across the rocky terrain. The scope was damaged beyond use, and the rifle's zeroing was completely off. With enemy forces converging on their location, there was no time to repair her equipment. The team would have to extract without sniper support, moving through 5 miles of dangerous terrain to reach the pickup zone. But Sarah wasn't finished. She grabbed Torres's backup rifle, a weapon she had never fired before with a scope she wasn't familiar with. As the team began moving, she provided rearguard security, engaging simulated enemies at distances she had to estimate without proper range-finding equipment. Shot after shot found their mark despite the unfamiliar weapon and damaged scope. She adapted to the rifle's characteristics within minutes, compensating for its different ballistics and sight picture. When they finally reached the extraction point, she had eliminated 12 opposing forces and helped the entire team escape without casualties. That night, SEAL Team 7 gathered for their vote. Sarah waited in her quarters, knowing that her military future hung in the balance. She had given everything she had to prove herself worthy of their trust. At 2,100 hours, Commander Harrison knocked on her door. His expression was unreadable as she opened it. "Pack your gear, Martinez," he said quietly. "We deploy tomorrow night." For a moment, she wasn't sure what he meant. Then, she saw the slight smile on his face. "Welcome to the team," he added. "Don't make us regret this decision." The vote had been unanimous. Every member of SEAL Team 7 had agreed that Sarah Martinez had earned her place among them. She was no longer just a sniper assigned to their unit. She was one of them, a warrior they would trust with their lives in the deadly mountains of Afghanistan. The Black Hawk helicopter cut through the darkness above the Hindu Kush Mountains, its engines muffled by special sound-dampening technology. Inside the aircraft, SEAL Team 7 sat in silence, each operator lost in final preparations for what could be their most dangerous mission yet. Sarah Martinez checked her rifle one last time, running her fingers along the familiar contours of the weapon that had become an extension of herself. Intelligence reports indicated that Omar Rashid, the Taliban commander responsible for dozens of coalition deaths, would be meeting with 3 other high-value targets in a compound nestled in a remote valley. The window for capture was narrow, perhaps only a few hours before the targets would disperse again into the vast Afghan wilderness. Commander Harrison's voice crackled through their headsets as the helicopter approached the drop zone. "Remember, this is a capture mission. We need Rashid alive for interrogation. Martinez, you have authorization to engage any targets that threaten the team, but Rashid is off-limits unless there's imminent danger to team members." Sarah acknowledged the order, knowing the weight it carried. As the team sniper, she would be positioned on a ridge 800 meters from the target compound, close enough for precision shots, but far enough to remain undetected. Her job was to provide overwatch, eliminate sentries, and protect her teammates if the mission went wrong. The helicopter touched down in a clearing 5 kilometers from the target. The team moved out immediately, disappearing into the rocky terrain like shadows. Sarah carried her rifle and 60 pounds of additional equipment, including backup ammunition, radio gear, and survival supplies. The altitude made every step demanding, but 3 weeks of integration training had prepared her for this moment. The approach took 4 hours of careful movement through terrain that could hide enemy observers or improvised explosive devices. Sarah moved with the team for the first 3 kilometers, then broke off to reach her designated sniper position while the assault element continued toward the compound. Climbing alone through the darkness, she relied on night vision goggles and careful route planning to avoid detection. Every footstep was calculated, every shadow analyzed for potential threats. The ridge position offered perfect visibility of the target area, but reaching it required traversing exposed rock faces where a single mistake could trigger an avalanche of loose stone. She reached her position 2 hours before dawn, settling into a carefully constructed hide that would make her nearly invisible to enemy observers. From here, she could see the entire compound through her rifle scope. 3 buildings surrounded a central courtyard, with guard positions at strategic corners. Infrared signatures through her thermal scope revealed at least 8 enemy fighters, more than intelligence had predicted. Her radio whispered with reports as the assault team moved into position. Chief Chin confirmed that explosive charges were placed on the compound's rear wall. Torres reported that communications were being jammed to prevent the targets from calling for reinforcement. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Then, at 0347 hours, everything went wrong. A Taliban patrol that wasn't supposed to exist appeared on the valley floor, moving directly toward the compound. 12 heavily armed fighters with vehicles and heavy weapons, enough firepower to annihilate the SEAL team if they reached the target area. Sarah's voice cut through radio silence. Overwatch to team leader. Patrol of 12 approaching from the south. They'll reach the compound in 15 minutes. Harrison's response was immediate. "Can you stop them?" Sarah studied the approaching patrol through her scope. They were moving in tactical formation with proper spacing and security. These weren't amateur fighters, but experienced Taliban veterans who knew how to operate in groups. Stopping 12 fighters with a single rifle would require perfect shooting and considerable luck. "I can slow them down," she replied. "But they'll figure out my position quickly." "Do it. We need time to extract the targets." Sarah acquired her first target, the patrol leader who was directing the others' movement. At 650 meters, the shot would be challenging, but manageable. She controlled her breathing, calculated wind drift, and squeezed the trigger. The patrol leader dropped instantly, causing immediate confusion among his men. Sarah shifted targets quickly, engaging the radio operator who was trying to call for support. Her second shot silenced the communications threat permanently. But now the remaining fighters knew they were under attack. They spread out and began moving toward her position, using rocks and terrain features for cover. Sarah continued engaging them, but each shot revealed more about her location. Return fire began striking the rocks around her position, forcing her to move frequently to avoid being pinned down. Meanwhile, the assault team breached the compound walls. The controlled explosions echoed through the valley as SEAL Team 7 flooded into the target area. Harrison's voice reported contact with enemy forces inside the compound, but they were closing on the primary targets. Sarah's situation was deteriorating rapidly. The surviving Taliban fighters had identified her general position and were coordinating their assault. She counted at least 8 remaining enemies, armed with automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades. One RPG hit close enough to shower her with rock fragments and temporarily stun her with the concussion. She relocated to a backup position 30 meters away, a movement that saved her life as machine gun fire raked her previous location. From the new position, she could see 3 fighters advancing up the ridge while others provided covering fire. They would reach her in minutes. Her radio crackled with urgent updates from the compound. The team had captured 2 high-value targets, but Rashid was barricaded in a fortified room with several bodyguards. Extracting him would take additional time that they didn't have. Sarah made a decision that would define the rest of the mission. Instead of continuing to engage the fighters climbing toward her, she shifted her rifle toward the compound and acquired targets that were threatening her teammates. Through her scope, she could see muzzle flashes from Taliban positions that had the SEAL team pinned down. Her first shot eliminated a sniper who had taken position to engage the assault team. Her second shot destroyed a machine gun position that was preventing the SEALs from advancing. Shot after shot, she provided precision fire support that allowed her teammates to complete their mission, even as enemy fighters closed on her position. The Taliban fighters reached her ridge just as Harrison reported mission success. Rashid was in custody, along with 2 other high-value targets. But the team's extraction was complicated by the firefight in the valley and Sarah's desperate situation on the ridge. With enemies only 50 meters away, Sarah abandoned her sniper position and began moving toward the extraction point. She carried her rifle and essential gear, but had to leave behind her carefully constructed hide and backup equipment. The pursuing fighters were close enough that she could hear their voices as they searched the rocky terrain. The extraction helicopter appeared on schedule, but enemy fire from multiple positions made landing impossible. The pilots circled overhead, looking for an opportunity to set down safely while taking sporadic fire from the valley floor. Sarah reached the designated pickup zone to find her teammates already there, along with their captured prisoners. But Taliban reinforcements were arriving from multiple directions, and the situation was becoming untenable. They needed to find a new extraction point, and they needed to do it quickly. Commander Harrison made the call to move to an alternate landing zone 2 kilometers away. The team would have to cross exposed terrain while carrying prisoners and wounded, all under enemy fire. It would be the most dangerous part of an already perilous mission. Sarah took point for the movement, using her rifle to clear the route ahead while the rest of the team moved with their prisoners. She engaged enemy fighters at ranges from 100 to 400 meters, each shot buying precious seconds for the team's movement. Her ammunition was running low, but she continued providing covering fire. The alternate extraction point was a flat area of ground surrounded by rocky hills. The helicopter could land there, but the position would be exposed to enemy fire from multiple directions. As the aircraft approached, Sarah positioned herself to provide overwatch while her teammates loaded the prisoners. Taliban fighters appeared on the surrounding ridges just as the helicopter touched down. Sarah engaged them rapidly, her rifle cycling through its remaining ammunition as she tried to suppress multiple targets simultaneously. Muzzle flashes erupted from at least 6 different positions as enemy fighters attempted to destroy the aircraft. Chief Chun was hit by enemy fire while loading the prisoners, taking a round through his shoulder that spun him around but didn't drop him. Torres helped him to the helicopter while continuing to return fire with his assault rifle. The aircraft was taking hits, but the pilot held his position despite the danger. Sarah's rifle clicked empty just as the last team member reached the helicopter. She had expended all her ammunition, nearly 200 rounds fired in support of the mission and extraction. Without pause, she drew her sidearm and continued engaging targets as she ran toward the aircraft. The helicopter lifted off under fire, with all team members and prisoners aboard. Sarah was the last to board, pulled into the aircraft by Sullivan just as enemy rounds shattered the windows where she had been standing. The aircraft climbed rapidly away from the valley, disappearing into the darkness before Taliban reinforcements could arrive. As they flew back toward base, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. The mission was successful beyond expectations. 3 high-value targets were in custody, including the most wanted Taliban commander in the region. No American casualties except for Chin's shoulder wound, which would heal completely. Intelligence gathered from the prisoners would lead to dozens of additional operations and save countless lives. But, more importantly for Sarah, something fundamental had changed during the mission. When Taliban fighters threatened the team, her teammates had risked their lives to extract her. When she was pinned down and running low on ammunition, they had coordinated their movements to support her withdrawal. When the helicopter was under fire, Sullivan had pulled her to safety without hesitation. She was no longer an outsider trying to prove herself worthy of their acceptance. She was a team member whose skills and courage had been tested in combat and found reliable. The Brotherhood of Warriors wasn't about gender or background or any other superficial characteristic. It was about trust earned through shared danger and mutual sacrifice. 3 days after the mission, Sarah walked into the team room for the daily briefing. The conversation stopped as it always did when someone entered, but this time the silence felt different. Then, one by one, every member of SEAL Team 7 stood up. They stood not because military protocol required it, but because they recognized her as one of their own. She had proven herself in the crucible of combat, had demonstrated the skills and character that made someone worthy of the SEAL Trident. No official records would note her presence on the mission. No medals would publicly acknowledge her actions. But, in that room, among the warriors who mattered most, Sarah Martinez had earned something more valuable than any decoration. She had earned their respect, their trust, and their recognition as a warrior equal to any who had ever worn the uniform. The female sniper who walked into that room was no longer remarkable for her gender. She was remarkable for her courage, her skill, and her absolute dedication to the team and the mission. When every SEAL in the room stood to acknowledge her entrance, they weren't just honoring a woman who had broken barriers. They were honoring a warrior who had proven herself worthy of standing among the best fighters in the world. That recognition meant everything, because it came from the only people whose opinion truly mattered, her brothers in arms who had trusted her with their lives and found that trust justified. In a world where recognition often comes with fanfare and publicity, the greatest honor came quietly, in a small room, from the warriors who knew what courage really looked like.